Since the mainstream media seems to believe that Michelle Wolf, Elon Musk, and LeBron James are more important topics to discuss than presidential elections in countries within our hemisphere, the Florida Maquis is going to step up and report to you the real news, the things that are going on in the world that are going to affect your life. In Colombia, they do presidential elections a little bit differently than we do. It's more of a classic, straight popular vote. Everybody goes on the ballot. If anybody, of course, gets more than 50%, they become president. If not, they take the top two and they put them into a runoff election. And in this particular case, it has been a man named Iván Duque and Gustavo Petro, pictured here. Now, they represent two very strikingly different visions for their country. The man on the right is pro-globalist, pro-business, very much in bed with the right-wing, quote-unquote, paramilitaries. The guy on the left has more of a nationalist bend. He wants to see Colombia remain independent of the IMF, independent of big U.S. global corporate interests. And that is his platform. Now, he, strangely enough, was actually a member of the FARC at one time, a group that has been widely demonized and misreported on, and what they stood for and what they were trying to do. If you would like a more detailed explanation of the difference between right and left wing, I already have this video up on my Patreon. It's, suffice it to say, neither one of these groups is anti-gun like the right and left wing up here, but they have different visions. They absolutely do. The group here on the left wants to remain, the area to remain unique. It wants to remain, they want for their neighbors a country that has a national distinct identity, that has the self-determination at its root, even if it means they're not as wealthy or not as powerful. They think that's more important, whereas the guys on the right are operating at the behest of big ranches, big pharma, big oil, big agribusiness, the government. These guys here were the reason that these guys here even exist. The government, Colombian government back in the 60s, created these guys to enforce the will of big pharma, big oil, big agribusiness. And so as a result, these guys stood up to combat it. So, but anyway, if you want a more detailed explanation of that, you can find that on my Patreon channel. The people here are conducting an amazing conversation, and we're also doing military intelligence training. But back to the election results. This is how everything played out this weekend. Iván Duque, the big globalist, big pro-business guy, got 39.1% of the vote. Gustavo Petro, the nationalist, got 25.1%, and the big surprise was this guy named Fajardo, and he was kind of a middle-of-the-road guy, and kind of not really allying himself with either party. He got almost 25% of the vote himself, 23.7%. This guy here, Vargas Lleras, is the vice president, or I should say was the vice president under Manuel Santos. By their law, he had to resign, technically, to run. So he only got 7.3%. And what this really means is that this guy here, Lleras, represents the belief system of this guy here and Santos. So more than likely in the runoff between these two, you're going to see this 7.3 go over here to Duque. So that'll put him at 46.4. So this is going to be the hard part. Is Petro going to be able to pull this group of voters over? Because this would give him 48.9, and that would then make everything else just basically a horse race. This is where they are, and this is huge sea change for Colombia. You have to understand that this was never anywhere near this close before. Fajardo's an interesting guy. He really is. And that he did this well was surprising. He has yet to announce who he wants his voters to vote for, but we're going to be watching that very, very closely. And as soon as that comes out, we're going to let you know. This guy, honestly, if you look into his past and who he is and what he stands for, it is as predictable as the day is long. You know, he has never met a big business he didn't like, and he is the type that wants to be part of the gravy train, and he will use military force if he has to maintain that. This was the guy that served under Santos, and as you can see by his paltry showing of 7%, that clearly the big globalist movement in Colombia is dying and dying quickly. This guy is the story. A Christian, a former revolutionary, a Maquis himself, having lived that life, having stood up for his beliefs, stood up for his morals, has done the unthinkable in Colombia by even being this close. And I think it's going to be something that my audience for sure is going to be able to appreciate when they see how badly they've been misinformed about the story going on in the northern part of South America. See, we've had this big corporate interest that's been feeding you all of these lies for so long. And they've been trying to make you believe that these people down here that want to maintain their national identity are your enemy. And they are not, because as we can see, that's something that has risen to the forefront in our country. That Americans want America to remain unique in its place in the world. We even want our states to remain that way. You know, the people of Tennessee want to speak for the people of Tennessee. The people of Florida want to speak for the people of Florida. Same for Texas and California and everywhere else. And that's what's going on down here. It's just going down on a national level. And with Ecuador, a member of OPEC, recognizing Mr. Maduro, and the U.S. reluctantly having to admit to itself that it has to now recognize the president of Venezuela, regardless of the mass disinformation campaign that occurred, and now the extradition of a former president of Panama that's going to start pointing fingers and naming names. We are going to see a very interesting summer. It is going to be something where there's going to be breathtaking events around the world, and the Southern Hemisphere is not going to be immune from that. I would not be surprised if this move by Colombia to go into NATO might have a military aspect to it. It's to this day, the U.S. still imports Venezuelan oil. Regardless of all the bluster, regardless of all the talk, we still have 5 refineries in the Gulf Coast that expect Venezuelan oil deliveries every single day. Venezuela wasn't some third world backwater country like a lot of people thought. It's a founding member of OPEC. You know, right up there with Saudi Arabia and, you know, the UAE and all these, Iraq and Iran. Huge oil exporter. And I think people are understanding now the dynamic, the difference between an oil producer and an oil exporter. That even though the U.S. is an incredible oil producer, number 1 oil producer in the world, that it's also the number 2, importer of oil. You would think that would be kind of counterintuitive, but it's going to make a difference down here. It really is. If we see a movement from Ecuador all the way through Colombia and into Venezuela, where these people are going to reject globalism and reject the lead by U.S. and China, there's going to come to a head. It's absolutely going to come to a head. And I think Russia is going to be a major player in this. And I think the world, unlike the United States, is watching Colombia very closely to see where their leadership goes. And if Petro can pull off this win, and up here, and I'll leave the video here at 10 minutes, in Mexico, there's a guy named Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He goes by AMLO, AMLO, who is going to be standing for president very soon in their elections. And this could mark a huge change for Latin America. And that we're just right here, and this is so close to us that this isn't being reported on a much greater scale, I guess, in America is disturbing. Either they know something and they're not telling us, or they're just ignorant. Either way, it's frightening and disappointing. So we will leave it there. Thank you so much for the support. I very much appreciate it. And like I said, we are having an amazing discussion over here at Patreon. It was something I wish I'd done a long time ago. I can speak about things over here in a way where I don't have to censor myself. And if you want to be a part of that, please, we would love to have you. But here on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you.